Welcome to day 3. We're one step closer to Valentine's. Today, we're going to take those motifs that you drew yesterday or today and transfer them onto either printer paper or tracing paper and then onto your printing block so we can move forward. Okay, by now I'm hoping that you have gone out and found lots of inspiration and you've come back with a few motifs that you're ready to move forward with. So the next step in the process is to basically trace your motif onto a piece of paper and then transfer it to the block. I like to trace the original motif. That way, if I decide I want to redo this block or if I want to use that motif in some way in the future, I haven't used it to rub my pencil marks onto the block, which you'll kind of understand what I mean in a second. So I do like to trace the existing sketch or drawing. That way it's kind of like making a copy. So today you're going to need your motif or the ones I've provided. You're going to need some printer paper. The thinner the better. And if you have it, if you want to one up your game, I would say to get some tracing paper. So tracing paper is definitely going to make the tracing process easier because, as the name describes, it is for tracing. So this is the tracing paper that I use. I really like it. Honestly, I just bought it because it was the price point that I was comfortable with at the time. So I'm going to show you how to do this with the tracing paper first. So let me get a fresh sheet. And it's exactly what you think. You're just going to literally take your pencil and trace your motif onto this paper. And I try to, because I'm a little bit crazy or maybe just smart, I don't know. I try to, use the paper, the tracing paper kind of systematically so I can like use every inch of it. You obviously don't have to do that, but it's a good way to save money on your art supplies because I know if you're like me, you love art supplies. And so as you can see, the beauty of having it be tracing paper is it's very, very easy to see your motif. And you can already see like I've gone off of my actual shape, but it doesn't really matter. I don't think it matters. So that's the first thing we're going to do. We're just going to take the tracing paper, trace over the motif. Now, if you're doing something more complicated, say you want to do this potion bottle, it's the same thing. And then I would say make sure to trace all these little, I put a little, some little details in just to give it some depth. So you can go in and trace all of that. Speed this up now. Okay, so there's our tracing of the heart and the potion bottle. Now, if you don't have tracing paper, then what I would recommend, so you can see already, if you take regular printer paper and put it on top, you can see the heart, you can see the potion bottle. You can't really see those little details that I have, so you can't really see, these little lines that are here and here and this swoopy line. If you want to be able to see a little bit better, you can always take these two pieces of paper, one on top of the other, and just tape them up into a window. So you basically are creating your own light box. That's a really simple way to do this. Or, if you feel like you could fill in the details on your own, then just sketch out, trace out the shape, and then you could fill the bottle with whatever you want. So that's what I mean by I'd be interested to see how other people interpret my motifs. You could do whatever you wanted inside. You could put some liquid inside. You could like write XOXO kind of in a diagonal. You could put a bow around it. You could do, anything with it. So those are the two different ways you can get your tracing ready to go. And now let's move on to actually transferring this to your block. Now that we have everything traced on the tracing paper, we want to transfer it from the tracing paper to our printing block. So I have this kind of little scrap. You might have a bigger piece, which is fine. I would say the same thing that I said with the tracing paper. So, if you have a bigger piece of block, then maybe, try to kind of puzzle piece it together so that you're saving as much block as you can. Kind of like when you're cutting out, Christmas cookies or something, and you try to like cut as many as you can out of your rolled out dough. Same thing. So you're going to want to go ahead and take the pencil side and place that down on your block. And you want to make sure everything stays right where you want it. And then there's a few different ways you could, basically you're just kind of rubbing this graphite and transferring it on to your block. So you'll probably, if you've watched any of my Instagram videos, you'll see that I use kind of the end of my Ulfa knife to do this. So I'll often just like take the Ulfa knife and do this. And then it's transferred. You could also use your handy handle. I'm pretty sure this will work. Let's just test it out on the other side so I'm totally sure. So you could take the end of your handle and just kind of rub and make sure you're hitting every line. Sorry. And then, oh, and you see I missed some. It's a little harder because this is round. So you really have to make sure you get every spot. Also, since I already rubbed on the other side, a lot of the graphite has moved off of this page. So, oh, see, it works. So you could use, I think that's probably a great tool for everybody because I'm presuming you have some cutting tools if you're taking this class. So go ahead and use the end of your handle and rub your design onto your block. Now you're ready to start cutting your block. And this is where things can, if I'm being totally honest, they can go awry. And that's because you might be thinking you want to cut on this line, but maybe you want to cut just inside this line. And maybe you don't want to cut anything out of this heart at all. So let me ink up these two blocks that I've already carved to give you kind of an idea and to help you see better what I've done. So with this one, I've literally just cut this heart out, kept it really plain. And I'll show you how I printed that in just a second. And then with this one, I basically created kind of like a thick line of a heart. So everything on the inside is taken out. So as you can see, you can create two, pretty different looking stamps from the same shape. So let me just print those real quick. So that's that one. And that one. So my plan for this heart is to just kind of cut out kind of a pattern inside of it. So then I could use these three together to create a lot of, basically an endless number of cards. So this might be the way that you want to go moving forward. Maybe you've chosen one simple motif and you want to carve it three different ways. Maybe you just want to carve it one way, one and done, and I would not blame you if that's what you want to do. But I just wanted you to kind of understand the breadth of what you could do with this medium. Generally, when I carve, I like to use this tiny cutting mat. I did include a link to that in my list of like all my tools, but if you do not need a cutting mat like this, I just happen to like it. It's a nice size for me, and like I said, my house is small. If you don't have a cutting mat, no problem. You just need something. So this is a little piece of cardboard. You see, I already test printed on it with the black. It'll be nice to have for carving. It'll also be nice to have for test printing. So you could cut up a cereal box, a cracker box, like whatever you have around. Say you got an Amazon order today, cut off one of the flaps of that box. You just want something that you can put your block on and kind of move around. That's how I like to carve. Some people like to carve straight on the table and move their block. I really like my table. and I'm always afraid that I'm going to put a gouge in it. So I would much rather put a gouge in this crappy piece of cardboard than in my table. So I'll say that. You do you. Um, so we're going to start by carving this heart out. And when I start, so we discussed in the previous lesson and we tested out all the different blades, and you might have figured out even in that short amount of time which ones you thought were the most useful, which ones you thought you would use the most often. For me, I never use this blade. I don't even actually know what it's intended for. You might have noticed in the video when I did my doodle, I just like tried some stuff out, but I in the end was like, yeah, I don't know what to do with that. I don't use it. If you happen to know what that's for, please tell me. I am very open to learning. I'm human. I can't know everything. So I always just set that one aside. I also rarely use this one that's more of a kind of, blocky U shape. For me, I don't really like it, but you might. So the ones that I use are this big moon shaped U, which is much softer shape than that blocky one. I like to use this to carve out large areas. So like the middle of this heart, I use that large U. I also like this very, very tiny V, and I will often start with a tiny V. So when we start carving today, I'm actually going to carve the outline of the heart with a tiny V. You could start with something bigger. So there's 2 additional V's in my set. One is narrower and one is wider. You could try either of those. I think you could probably start with either of those if you're doing just the straight heart. But I'm going to start with the tiny V because that's my comfort level. So let's get our cutter in the handle, and we make sure it's good and seated in place, and tighten it. And then if you're me, you double check it that it's going to actually not fall out, because I have had that happen. And now let me get a little bit closer so that you can really see what's happening. Okay, so here I am with my tiny V. I don't even know if it will be able to focus on it. It's so little. There we go. And we're just going to carve the outline of the heart. And so I feel comfortable doing one kind of long carve. And what I often do is I'll go, like for this, I'm going to go up until the curve starts and just carve all the way off the block. And then I turn the block and I seat my carving tool back in that little channel I just created. And then I kind of start again. That way I'm trying to create a smooth transition into this next line of carving. And I move the block and keep my hand in pretty much the same spot. And then as I'm approaching this spot here, I stop just before. And sometimes it doesn't cut that little piece all the way away. You can just pull it away, or you can leave it there. And once you start, this next part of the heart, it would just carve off. So I'm just moving the block around, keeping my blade at 30-degree angle. And once I get to this point, I'm just going to carve off, because for me, it's just easier that way. Might be different for you. Sorry, I've moved off screen a little. Okay, so now I've seated my tool back into that channel I made, and then I start my next cut. And I really want the bottom of my heart to have that kind of roundy shape. So I'm just going to go in there again and carve that. So that's our first carve. So I'm going to start with this U shape. This is often the second blade I'll turn to when I'm doing this kind of carving. So let me go ahead and put that in my handle. And again, I just test that it's not wiggly. And then I start again. So now I'm going to kind of go just outside. I'm going to have a little bit of my carving blade in that existing channel, but I want it a little bit outside too. So kind of half in, half out. And that's going to help me carve away like a little bit wider from this initial line. And when you have these wider blades, you kind of have to do a little bit of a dig in. It's a gentle dig, but that's kind of how I would describe it. So then we're gonna go and follow our channel, and I'm gonna do the same thing again. I'm gonna fall off. So now you can see that that's a much wider line, and we're gonna do that around the whole heart again. So I'll just go ahead and speed up the video so you don't have to listen to me and watch me do it too much, but here we go. Now that I'm at the point where I want to remove kind of a lot of material, I can move on to a much wider U shape, and that's going to help me kind of go a little bit faster. So this is the one I'm going to use next. Check. Yep, we're good. Okay. So there's a few ways you could start removing a lot of this material. You could just start going kind of outward and do that all the way around and just keep going all the way around your heart. So that's one option. Move that out of the way. The other option is to kind of follow the same process that we were using before. So to just kind of take out bigger chunks along your existing channel. And I do this both ways. Just depends on how you feel, what you're comfortable with, what you decide to do on the day. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove a lot of the block around the heart. And if you don't have an Olfa or an X-Acto to cut this piece of block smaller, you could just carve away all of this and then print this whole piece. It will make it harder for you to set everything where you want it when you're printing. So for me, I like to, at this point, because I don't want to waste my time carving a bunch of material away that I'm just going to cut away, which is much faster. So you'll notice with these hearts, I cut away almost everything except for like, just a tiny bit around. And that just makes it easier for me when I'm printing to kind of line everything up where I want it. But it's not necessary. And I think, let me just get some scissors. Hold on. I've been kind of wondering if this was a possibility. I wonder if you could just, oh, see, you can. You have a pair of scissors. You don't want to buy an X-Acto. You can just cut around it with your scissors. And these are little, like tiny little scissors. So yeah, go for it. I'm going to do it with an Olfa because that's my comfort zone. And I'm gonna, since I'm using an Olfa, I do need to use my cutting mat because I love my table. I don't want to cut into it with a cutting gouge or an Olfa knife. So you can just cut away. And if you don't cut all the way through, I often will even just like tear that part off. So it doesn't matter. And, always do what you're comfortable with, go the speed you're comfortable with. I am quite comfortable cutting this particular block. You might need to, cut it slowly. So just do several cuts in the same line until you have a full cut. But safety first, keep your hands safe and cut free. It's very important when it comes to going around that, kind of for lack of a better term, the butt shape of the heart. I kind of like to take this part away and then come back and take this part away. Again, it's just what's easier for me. And it doesn't need to be perfect because you're not going to see it. The next thing I will often do when I'm at this point is I will go around the edge, because if you print this now, actually let's print it now so that you see what I mean. Ink on there, you can already see it. So the ink is catching those little edges, and I don't want it to catch the edges. So I'm going to carve those away. Let's see how bad it is when we print it. Yeah, so I don't want this to be there, or even this little line. That's just for me on this particular block. That's what I don't want. So I am going to go back in and just carve around the edge again to clear away anything that's kind of raised up high enough that the ink will hit it. Let's do one more little test just to see, out of interest. Yeah, you can see only the heart has the black ink on it now, which is great. That's what we want. Print it here. Good. You can see where I didn't push hard enough, or maybe there's a little, sometimes a little piece of the block sticks to itself, and then you have a void. So like I said, I was going to try to just make this one kind of scribbly is what I was thinking in my head. If you've checked out my Instagram, I did a little scribbly heart last February, and I liked it. So I think it would be a nice addition to the other two I've already cut. So, and it's really easy. So this is really just showing you how you can kind of make something interesting with just simplicity. Ooh, see, wasn't seated. That's why I usually test. And you'll know when it's not properly seated in there because that will happen. It'll move on you. So again, test that it's wiggly, not wiggly. And then, so I'm just gonna I'm just winging it. Just kind of making stripey bits wherever I want. No rhyme or reason. I'm just cutting away pieces. And you can immediately see, since I have the black ink on there, kind of how it's going to look when it's printed, which if you're having trouble visualizing what it will look like and you're just at the point where you just have a pink piece of block or whatever color your block is, throw some ink on there, and then it'll really help you see as you carve away material kind of what it's going to look like when it prints. I know it took me a long time to be able to kind of visualize that, and I still sometimes mess it up because I'm human and we all are. So between now and tomorrow, try your best to have your block all carved up and ready to go. If you have any problems along the way, feel free to send me an email or message me through Instagram. I'm happy to help in any way that I can. And if you can't resist, I wouldn't blame you if you didn't want to wait to print your block. But if you do, we'll get started on that tomorrow, our fourth day, and we'll get to actually print our Valentines.